Order.
Mike Davenport.
Here.
Cheryl Fuller.
Here.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Here.
Carrie Pavasich.
Here.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Here.
Nancy Kupka.
Here.
And Caitlin Vincent. Here. Thank you.
We have a quorum. Let's stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry.
Nope, that's all right.
Okay, do we have anybody for the reception of visitors?
Comment slips? All right.
Okay, we're going to move on to our board workshop, but you had a statement?
So, yeah, tonight's meeting is a little goofy in the fact that we have a public hearing scheduled for 6:45. So the way that, and it has to happen, we have to wait for 6:45 for it to occur, but it doesn't have to happen exactly at 6:45. So we're going to begin the opening portion of our meeting, which is Gina's school report card report. If that concludes in under 15 minutes, we may move on to IASB resolutions, but at whichever point we finish an agenda item that is first after 6:45, we will jump to the public hearing, hold the public hearing, and then return to the superintendent's report. So that's kind of where we're at. So Gina, here's your clicker. It's on. Forward, back. There we go.
All right, so as you know, or may know, the Illinois State Board of Education released the school report cards last month. And District 99, both North and South High School, received a summative designation of commendable, which is the same summative designation we had for the 2 years prior to the pandemic. And then there was a bit of a pause or a hold and a carryover of those ratings. And so we continue for the last several years with the commendable rating. Basically, that means that our graduation rate is at least 67%. We're not necessarily in the top 10% of all schools, and we have no underperforming subgroups. So tonight we're going to look at a few key areas, graduation rates, because 50% of our rating is based on graduation rates. We'll look at 9th grade on track, an area that we are quite proud of. We'll also talk about SAT scores, and I'll also talk about chronic absenteeism, an area that we have been working on in each year. So tonight we'll look at the 4-year graduation rate, which makes the majority of that 50% is based on the 4-year graduation rate. And as you can see, our graduation rate is up from last year by 2.1%. And the state's is up as well, a little bit less at 1.3%. If you look at the years posted, basically 5 years, you'll see that we pretty much have stayed on par. And actually, if you were to look at the average, we're at 93.1%. The expectation is that all schools are at 90% or above. 9th grade on track. 9th grade on track is obviously for freshmen. To be considered on track, a student must earn at least 5 credits their freshman year. And that does not count summer school. That's during the school year. They cannot fail more than 1 semester in what is considered by the state as a core course. They consider ELA, so that's English reading, math, social studies, or science. And this is an area that we have focused on last several years because studies show, research shows, that a student who is on track as a freshman will continue to be on track and graduate on time. So 9th grade on track, you can see that this has gone up significantly. We're basically back to our pre-pandemic, and actually a little bit past that, rate. You will notice in 2020, the 98%, and that was a little higher than the previous year and a little higher than we have averaged, in part because of the do no harm, where students couldn't be penalized for the work that they did during the time that school was closed. If you eliminate that year, though, then it's certainly the highest that we've had out of the 5 years shown. And actually, it used to be called Freshman on Track. The state started this 9 years ago, and this is the highest we have been all 9 years. So it is the highest. Our average is 93.8 if you look at the last 9 years.
And if the board will remember, there was a lot of effort that was done in the buildings with our teachers and our staff in identifying students at risk of failing last year. So a lot of work by our teachers and our students last year to get that number.
So we'll talk tonight about SAT scores. And when we look at SAT scores, we often look at the average score. This is for the evidence-based reading and writing. There's two parts that we look at. The basically ELA part, or evidence-based reading and writing, and the math section. And while it would be best to look at these scores in cohorts of students, in the same way we look at graduation rates, right? When we look at graduation rates, we look at cohorts of students, like the class of 2022, and they should graduate in 4 years. And when we look at SAT scores, it would be best to look at them in the same way, as a cohort of students. So to look at growth, how students have grown. And as you know, the state several years ago, before the pandemic hit, instituted for freshmen to take the PSAT 8-9, sophomores to take the PSAT 10, and then juniors to take the SAT. And so that would give us a nice growth measure over time. Baseline being that freshman year to how they've grown or where they've grown to by their junior year. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, that was put on hold. So we don't necessarily have great data in terms of growth just because of the years that we didn't test. Nonetheless, we'll look tonight a little bit at the scores, and this is comparing students' average scores. So in 2022, so those were juniors last year, so it's our current seniors. 2021, it would be students that have already graduated. So as you look at these scores, we are down a little bit on our evidence-based reading and writing, just over 12 points. And the state is down approximately 10 points. So we're both down a little bit.
But these are all only seniors.
These are our current seniors who took the test last April.
Right, but all of the
Yeah,
years are
but it's,
only
yeah,
seniors.
it's not the same student, it's the senior
Senior class, yeah,
class of
okay.
each year. Absolutely, thank you. As we look at math, actually in math, we also show a decline, a very slight decline of almost 3 points, 2.9, and the state shows 12.6. So while we declined slightly, the decline was more significant for the state.
And once
So-
again,
oh, sorry.
I'm going to interrupt you, Gina,
Sorry.
to point out that looking at that as a decline is not the proper way to look at that. It's just the way we're forced to, as Gina said, because we don't have the students' growth over time. A more accurate view of this would be to look at that 2022 cohort as a whole, the 2021 cohort as a whole, and look at how we are comparing to the state averages, and just look year to year. Are we keeping kind of the same distance that we tend to keep year to year over the larger state cohort? Sorry, Gina.
No, that's fine. And if you factor the two together, so if you factor the evidence-based reading and writing, and you factor in the math scores, we're down approximately 15 points total, and the state's down almost 23. So this year, wanted to look at how we're doing in relation to other DuPage high school districts. So for example, districts that have high schools like Glenbard or Hinsdale, the DuPage County high school districts. And looked this time at the percentage of students who meet or exceed standards. And that's roughly the top third of students. So the expectation about a third of your students would be meeting or exceeding. And the state has set a pretty high bar, and they did that, they're required to do that, by the way, in the ESSA plan. So the bar to meet in Illinois for both evidence-based reading and writing and for math is 540. Interestingly, though, the College Board benchmark to where the College Board says a student should be is 480 for evidence-based reading and writing and 530 for math. So I just want to share that as you consider the previous slides. But we took a look here to see how we are doing in comparison, not just to the state, but in comparison to the other DuPage high school districts. And We were down in evidence-based reading and writing in terms of the percentage of students that met or exceeded 5.6%. The average for the high school districts was 5.8, if you just look at 2022. So from 2021 to 2022, 5.6% for District 99 and 5.8% for the high school districts. And of course, we're one of those, right? There's 7 high school districts, we're one of the 7.
Do we know, do we know what the median is for those, as opposed to the average?
I did not calculate.
Okay.
I can, sure, I can do that.
I'd just be curious if we were in the upper or lower.
Mhm. And I have every school on there, so I can certainly do that and report back, absolutely.
Thanks.
Gina, each one of these is a different cohort,
Different cohort of students, absolutely.
but there's no denying the trend down.
The downward trend.
You know, state, our county, the district, and I don't know, this is probably not a wild guess, but I'm gonna guess nationally, we probably see a similar thing. So, any idea what's that attributed to? Because you'd expect with different cohorts that there'd be a lot of up and down,
Fluctuation.
but not a trend.
Well, I think with COVID, don't you think? COVID is
Yeah, but this is
affected a
17,
lot.
18, 19,
There's no 20, because we
There's
didn't
no
do the
20
test
because
in
we didn't
20.
test.
No, but
21 and 22.
the first 3 were all pre-COVID.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's a lot, once again, you don't know where they started and where they ended up, but I think some of what we're seeing now is the change that happened in colleges aren't valuing these tests as much as they were before. So we have a lot of students where this is,
They don't care.
like, it's not essential for them to get into the school that they want to go into. Plus, 21, 22, there's a lot of trauma going on, you know, across the country, and I think seeing that, you know, in those test scores is reflected.
I think that's a good
Interested to
point,
see.
that there's less incentive for students, you know, it's not the critical test that it used to be. Like, if you didn't get this score, you were done,
Well,
you know.
And in 2017, it was common in the United States to be telling kids, college is your only pathway to success. So
That
these
too.
tests really matter. In a lot of ways, these tests in communities were measuring how much extra help they were getting in test prep outside of the school day.
Right.
And over this period of time, the national trend has been encourage kids to choose their own path. And go to college if it makes sense to you, and go to community college if that makes
Right.
sense to you, and go to the armed forces, or go into the workplace. So, you know, if 10 years ago, 7 years ago, your focus was college, 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 and these tests super matter, and they did matter for college admission, and now the narrative across the country becomes choose your own path, and universities are saying the tests don't matter as much, I think you're gonna see
And-
some of that happen.
And to be clear, the reason they're saying it doesn't matter as much is because it's actually a very poor indicator of
It's a
how well
terrible
a
predictor.
student will do in college. So
GPA
it's-
is a far better predictor.
Yeah, which is why we've changed how we, you know, the goals of what we're shooting for. In terms of graduation rates, 9th grade on track, these things are really the telling things about how successful our district is doing, not that.
Well, another thing I was thinking, and I don't know if this is a factor, but the state switched from ACT to
Yeah.
SAT at some point too.
Yeah.
And I don't know what year that was, but
Actually, yeah.
at that particular time, kids made a choice to choose ACT
Right.
versus SAT based on where they thought they were strong,
I think it was around 17.
Actually, yeah, 2017 took the ACT.
Yeah,
So what is this?
This is all SAT.
It's all,
It's
since
all-
it's been
it's-
required.
Yeah, it says
Except
all SAT.
2020 because of.
Yeah, so that could be a factor, because
Certainly could.
yeah, because we switched tests for the state
Yep.
of Illinois for whatever reason we did that. And then the other thing I was thinking, kids, as I talk to more students, they are more entrepreneur, they want to pave their own way, to the point about saying that it was a time where it's college, college, college.
Yeah.
I think they are finding their way. I'm talking to more students who feel like I have other options outside of college. So that could be, you know, who knows, but just a thought.
And while we will have very soon cohort data We may also see a difference too as the SAT is moving online in the next
Next
couple.
year,
Yeah,
or
next
next
year,
couple
their
years,
first.
yeah.
What's that mean?
So it'll be an online test.
Instead of a paper-based
Now it's
test.
paper pencil, so it'll
You
be an
have to go
online
in
test.
and do it, yeah.
Which that'll be interesting to see for some students. That might be a better way,
Mhm.
some maybe not.
It's also adaptive
it'll
as
be-
well, correct?
But we'll also be comparing then students who took the PSAT 8, 9, and 10 on paper to SAT online, so that could have an impact as well. But we'll see.
As you look at these cohorts, you know, if I would be concerned if I saw our position cohort to cohort drastically changing beyond what you're seeing cohort to cohort. I mean, those are students that all were kind of born at the same time, grew up through school at the same time,
Yeah.
you know, are having similar experiences, especially within the county. And if you saw us drastically changing in position, rank, distance between us and the state or the county, that would say, oh, what's going on? The fact that we're maintaining kind of that same look over time indicates that we're staying on pace of where we were cohort by cohort.
So this was evidence-based reading and writing. This is math, again, the same idea. District 99 is in blue. You'll note here that we actually went up 0.4%, which is nominal. However, if you look at the other two, went down.
Mhm.
So the other high school districts, and again, it's an average, so we're included in that, 2.1 and then 0.5 for the state. So an area that we have worked a lot on, including meetings this summer, looking at discipline policies, looking at attendance, looking at how the codes that we use in our own system to make sure that, to ensure basically that we're recording things correctly, started before we actually knew what our chronic absenteeism number was. ISB defines a student being chronically absent if that student misses 10% or more school days with or without an excuse. Even if a parent calls them in, if they're sick, they go to the orthodontist. If they take one of their 5 mental health days, those all count.
College visit days.
College visit days, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be that the student missed the whole day, but it compounds by periods.
Mhm,
It can add up.
Mhm.
And so basically it's 17.5 days or more. Student would have to miss 17.5 days or more for any reason to be considered chronically absent. And this is an area of concern, and I do want to point out, which I'm sure you realize, is that in this case, we want the bar to be lower, right? In the other cases, right, that was impressive, but you can see that this has actually increased for us by 6.7%.
Is the definition changed at all in this? It's, okay.
The definition has remained the same. You may recall in 2019 was a time when we went back and looked at internally how we were coding things and the different percentages that one period counted as. So some of that correction that occurred between 19 and 20, although 20, it's hard to say, right?
Right.
Could be because of that. But definitely, we have seen an increase of up to 23%. You'll note that the state has also seen an increase of 8.7%, but this is something that we are definitely focused on and working on as well. And some of this is communication, because again, it's excused absences as well.
When you
So
look
again,
at this, I'm sorry, is it calendar year?
Yes,
in a
school year, not calendar,
Okay,
but school year.
so 2020 is the school year?
1920.
Okay,
It's the ending.
okay.
Are we still,
2021 was the,
2021 school, yeah,
so looking at 2022,
last year.
could we have had parents keeping students home because of fear of COVID, this sort of thing?
Yep.
So I mean, you've dug into those numbers, I'm
We
guessing.
have, and actually, if a student has COVID and it's documented, there is a code for that that doesn't go against this rating. But it's only if it's documented, we know it, and we apply the correct code. But oftentimes,
Got it.
we
We
wouldn't
didn't-
necessarily
we
know.
didn't know.
If a student's out sick,
Yes. And they didn't
it
bother.
could be for
Mhm.
many
For the last
different
2 years,
reasons.
we've told anybody, if you have any symptoms, stay home, you know,
Right.
go get tested. So if a parent kept a kid home because they had a sore throat for a day, went and got tested, negative results came back, that would count as an absence because they didn't have COVID. They were just checking to see if they did. So-
Any feeling, you know, what the pulse of, like, what's happening right now, this year so far?
So our numbers were very high. And I realized in September, before this data was pulled again, that we had an error in the way we were coding some things. So we are actually going back now and correcting it, not for this year, we corrected some, yes. But for this school year, going back and corrected some of it, because in some cases, we, for example, knew that a student was documented out with COVID, but just listed the student as out medical.
Oh,
So like, that's just one example,
okay.
where if you use the COVID codes, again, it doesn't go against us for chronic absenteeism. So we are in the process of going back and making corrections, so that we get a true number.
Right, yeah.
And do we do anything with students who are hospitalized?
So if a student is hospitalized and they are receiving educational services, it does not count against us.
Okay.
If a student is hospitalized, for example, is in a car accident, and goes to the ER, that day does count against us because we're not providing services for a single day.
Yeah, okay. But long-term,
But if it's a long-term hospitalization, it could be for a variety of different reasons, and we are providing services, which we do, that does not count against us. And we had found some errors in that as well that we are correcting.
But returning from the pandemic, this is a nationwide trend of absences being up for a multitude of reasons. But this is not, we're not going alone with this data right now.
And
obviously.
And our principals and their teams have been looking at the data. They've been working on lowering suspension rates. We have the PATH program. The board has supported our PATH program. So we're looking at restorative practices. So not just looking at codes and different things like that, but that also discipline-related absences factoring into that as well. So this slide is the same idea as the other slides in terms of comparing District 99 to other DuPage County high school districts and then to the state. And while we are up 6.7%, you'll note that the county is up 9.2%. So,
And this is a good one where if you look back in time, we outpaced and we've switched that trend.
I see that.
Mm-hmm,
and
yeah.
So that's evidence of the work that we have been doing around this. It's still growing though.
Mm-hmm.
it is, but we're working on it. And like I said, the buildings have really taken a hard look at it and are very committed to reducing, for example, suspensions using our PATH program, because suspensions factor in there as well. Even though we're suspending the student, those count against in the ratings. Any questions?
I think that the school board portion of the presentation took up at least 20% of the time, which would keep the 18 minutes and under.
I think the clock's still ticking, Mike, as you advocate for time.
Okay.
All right, as I mentioned, as we opened, we're gonna skip the next two items to just move to the public hearing, and then we'll circle back to those items. So, let me get to that slide. All right.
Okay, so Mark Stalen will explain the reasons for the key levy and any proposed increase, and we will permit anyone desiring to be heard an opportunity to present testimony. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Mark?
All right,
Okay.
Mark.
I'll get to that in a little bit. You know, with taxes, there's always things we do know, things we don't know. things that we don't know right now, what the EAV is going to be for the 22 levy, calendar 22 levy, but it'll occur in the next 4 months after December. New construction, and in this case, this is a big factor. We don't know new construction. We do get some assessments, help from the assessors, and they give us estimates of what they're turning in now. But when we did this, it's 3 months before the end of the year. We're hoping there's some more that might come in, because there are collectively the 4 townships only had, it was less than 1%, and typically it's 2%. It might even be bigger. Because there was a lot of suppressed construction during the COVID period, and it seems we went through a period where there was actually good new construction that we'd hoped to pick up. And we know what the CPI factor is that limits us for the tax caps. Tax caps limit us by the lower of either CPI, which is what their standard is for inflation, or 5%, just a flat 5%. They've been in business, the tax caps have been around since 1992. That year, the inflation factor was 6%, and so they used 5% as the starting target. Over time, we have not had the inflationary factor break and be higher than 5% until this year. So the average over the last 20 years somewhere in the 2 to 2.5%. So this is an unusually high inflation factor because it's 3 times what the normal is, and it's even higher, 1/2 of what that is for that 5% limit. So the issue is we are going to be having putting a levy out, but we know that inflation, and that's where this comes in, for this last levy was 7% that we're waiting for now. We even think that the next levy come along could be a trend now for a couple of years. So we're trying to protect, because in the green, the bottom line, that's our cap for the levy is going to be 5%. That's the lower of new construction, or 5%, not new construction, the inflation or the 5% cap. So typically we might say, well, let's just leave it alone and see what happens. But in that case, we know that on the expenditure side, we're going to be seeing some big costs. We know that we're having trouble hiring people. We have people that just don't want to come and work, and we know that the only way we're going to be able to resolve that with paraprofessionals, and we just have a constant wanted, and there's just not coming, and nurses. And so there's positions, and we know that the busing is still a problem. There's a huge shortage of drivers nationally, but particularly in DuPage and these areas, there just aren't enough people that want to do it. And so they're going to have to pay more. And so we're expecting another double-digit bus cost, things like that. This is good, and we believe that these inflationary things are going to hit us. So the problem is we're having to put 7% into the revenue side, and we know, 5% into the revenue side, because we know that's what the cap is, the lower of the 5% or the 7%. And we know that inflation is 7%. So we know we're already going to be short trying to marry those two up. So it was very difficult to do this. I think we've only done this once before in the district during my tenure. So that's the issue. So now to do that, you have to have a truth and taxation hearing. That's what this is. We had to put it in the newspaper so that it was properly notifying the community members. And we had to discuss what the problem is that's causing us to exceed 5%. And the fact that we're seeing it at 7%, it's not for this year, and it's trending, could hit 8% across. That's just through September on the top. It could be another higher digit that you're going to have to be capped at 5%. We might have to do this again next year, depending on what we see now.
I'm trying to make sense of the percentages you list, and the numbers go up and down in the.
Yeah, this is straight from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that what the percentage is each month over.
And so then what are the numbers underneath the line?
So that's what the value is, and just so it's for me really to guard it.
Okay.
That's what they do, a basket of goods. And they buy a refrigerator, or they price out a refrigerator. And if it has newer options on it, they discount it, which is, when we're trying to get that to be a good number, that hurts. But the numbers underneath are what their evaluation using their system was for that. So you can see if it goes up, that number goes up, then the percentage goes up. So what I typically do with this is I take the last year, or last month, which is 296.8, and I just use that going across as if everything was the same price in 3 months than it is right now, this is where we would be. And we would be closer to 7%, because the bottom line is picking up. And it's the difference between where that number is, 296, compared to what that number was back here, creates that percentage for the.
Well, the graph, it's a little confusing to me, because I see 9.1% on the left there, I see 8% on the right, but that blue line got higher. So
9.1, on the top.
Yeah.
That's the most, that's the highest one, but it's comparing what that basket cost at that point in time. So 296 compared to 271.7.
271, I see.
So that's, it was
I
a
get
pretty
it.
big variation for it to go up.
Okay.
But it's coming back down, and it's all based on what the distance is between those two lines. That creates the percentage.
The other piece of this is that, and what you're driving to with all this too, is that, our rates based on what's happened, but and then that's gonna determine the money that we're
Yeah.
getting to pay for things
Well,
in the
that's the issue.
future.
We know
And
that-
the numbers are gonna be even higher,
Yeah.
so.
Well, could be lower. We don't know, but you're just projecting into the future.
And here's the thing to make sure everybody understands, because it can be alarming, say, there can be 8% increases in taxes. No, there will not. I really don't believe there will be, because I don't think that the new construction is gonna come in that much, but we put a big number there so that we can capture it all, because when it's all done, let's say we got 0 new construction, we wouldn't be able to claim any more than 5%. So the average property is gonna get hit when you average it all out by 5%. So everybody's taxes will go up by the cap amount of 5%. And the only way that we can get this new construction, that's new money. So if we get another 2%, that's coming from the new property, not the existing taxpayers and their property, unless they did some big renovation to it and brought it to the assessor's attention, which a lot of people don't.
But you have reason to believe this year that there's more new construction there
Well,
potentially than what's being reported right now
Yeah.
versus past years.
Feel that way because we've never had it this low. So we never had
I see.
new construction factor
That was
less
the
than 1%
explanation
in
I
the
was
last.
So I'll
Looking for.
remind the board,
Okay.
usually in December, Mark and Jeree bring us this
Yeah.
projection. They've had
It'll be the
all the way
request.
up until the end of the year to work with the assessors to determine what new construction is, right? As Mark is saying, CPI is what determines what everybody's increase is by. That's one part of the pot of money that comes in as property taxes for us. And that's spread across everybody based on their EAV, what the value of their property is. Then there's another chunk of new taxes that come in that isn't spread across everybody. That's just based on new construction in the community. Typically, Mark and Jeree have right up until the end of that presentation in January or December to bring you the best possible estimate that they can. And every year I tell you, Mark and Jeree have worked really hard to bring you a realistic number so that we're not overinflating what that could mean to the community. The problem is when you have a number that in aggregate is greater than 5%, we have to hold this truth in taxation meeting. That has to happen by law a certain number of days before you pass the levy. So, because you need to give your community enough notice to know that this is going to be a big number. So that makes it so that Mark and Jeree are now 2.5 months earlier in the year,
I see.
trying to guess what's going to happen at the end of the year. So then they can't bring you as accurate of a number. They need to bring you a number that has more buffer in it because we don't know what's going to happen over the next 6 to 8 weeks. So, you know, in years past, Mark and Dree explained, like, we've done all of this work to get this very exact number so that our community can have trust and that we're not overinflating what the actual number is. Because in the end, really you could say 100% right now. It wouldn't make a difference because it needs to go through, it'll be capped at 5% for CPI. And new construction is what new construction is. So if the board remembers, in February, we'll be back. Mark and Dree will tell you what the actual maximum levy was that we could have levied based on new construction. CPI is set at 5. And then we come back and the board goes through a process of readjusting their levy, readjusting our levy to match what we could actually tax.
Yeah, that'll be at the April meeting.
Or April meeting, okay. So, you know, we always try to get as accurate as possible, but always make sure that we believe we'll capture all of that new construction. We don't want to come to the board and to the community and underestimate what that new construction is, because the only time you can bring those funds in is when they first come on board. If we miss it, we lose that new revenue forever. And then the rest of the community has to pick up our mistake for that. So we don't want to leave any of that new construction on the table. So that's why Mark's saying, even though we're capped at 5, and it's unlikely we're going to get another 3% in new construction, we can't leave any of that 3% on the table, even though it might be 1%, it might be 2%, it might be half. We don't know, because we're so far away. So Mark and Dree don't have the time and the tools to give you as accurate of a projection as they have historically.
Understood.
And last year, new construction was 2%.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow,
Yeah, so,
got it.
yeah.
So that's why, you know, we think we're coming in at 8. That gives us the Truth and Taxation meeting at this time. Anything that we had above 5, which if we had 1 cent in new construction with the cap at 5, anything in new construction would push us above 5 and require this meeting tonight and this public hearing tonight. So pretty much every school district in Illinois is holding a Truth and Taxation meeting like we are.
Percentage, is that something,
Is what?
the percentage, above 7%, is that something where when
It's-
Bailey is saying everybody's having this, are we coming up with similar numbers, do we know that or no?
Well, everybody will be at 5, because everybody that's a tax cap district, which is the majority of Illinois, will be capped at 5, because inflation is greater than 5. That amount of new construction varies very much depending on the community that you're in. Yeah, but everybody is gonna be capped at 5, because inflation was greater than 5, yeah.
So
Yeah, and the thing is, we know it's a big number, totally don't think we're gonna actually get another 3% of new construction. But because it doesn't hurt the other taxpayers, it just is, the new payers are putting more money into our pot, that we feel let's just not miss it. You know, I think we'll be lucky if we get 2 to 2.5. But right now, that's not reflected in what I think we would be requesting.
That's where I was trying to put it, so it's hurting everybody's watching this, it hurts the new tax, and I don't say the word hurt, but.
Well, no, I mean,
No.
right now, without new construction, we're gonna have X amount of money, and it's gonna come from all the property owners that were there
Right.
the prior year. If someone builds a house in our property, new house, they're coming onto the roll, that we get to claim that and add that, it's outside of the cap that allows us to get money. They realize if somebody builds a house, you still have maybe kids in that school to come into school, or you just have taxable property that you should have the legal right to attach to. So it's letting us do that, and it doesn't affect the other tax bills.
But it creates a higher effective tax rate.
I'm sure people will misunderstand that. Nobody's
Right.
here tonight to question it, but
It's like two
Well,
pools of money,
you know, some will question it, and it does not, unless they did an improvement to their house, or they had an incredibly big change in their, their property, it won't affect what their tax bill is.
That's what I was just calling out for those who can go back
Yeah.
and watch it or could be watching.
Sure.
This is, in past years, we end up, matching CPI, right? So,
Plus the new
plus
construction.
the new construction, but for your typical.
For a typical
Like
homeowner,
for
yeah.
a typical homeowner, you're just matching CPI. That's the effect on you as a typical homeowner. This year, what's going to happen is, we can't match CPI.
Mhm.
We're gonna be less than,
Yes.
which means that, we're gonna have to maybe tighten things up a little bit. I mean, $1 at the beginning of the year is never worth $1 at the end of the year. This year, especially so.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, like a lot of people are even seeing, I mean, your income's not keeping up with inflation. Neither is ours, is what's going to
A
happen.
good thing to consider, I guess, is when the TIF was, grew out and it was
Yeah.
done, it came in as new money. It didn't increase or it didn't
Right.
lower their tax bill because it's treated totally separately from the existing assessments. Then the next year, it's included in that
Yep.
without anybody being hurt. So it's just important to know that.
Well, and this whole system was designed in the 90s to ensure that property tax payers were protected from periods of high inflationary rates, right?
And that's what's
So, even though everybody else's costs are increasing in their basket of goods
Right.
by 7-8%, this protects existing property owners from their taxes growing greater than 5%. In other years, it's protected by that CPI, right? We don't grow faster than the inflationary rate up until 5%. So our costs in some areas, especially as Mark said, like busing, are gonna grow much greater than 5%. But we'll have to use whatever mechanisms we can inside to run an effective budget to make sure that we make up for those gaps, but that isn't passed on to the average property tax, person paying property taxes.
So your property taxes is gonna be the one thing where you're not seeing.
Won't grow at the
you're not-
inflationary
You're not
rate,
seeing
yes.
it grow as much as everything else in your life. So it's in essence, a break.
Yeah, well,
That's my interpretation.
it always grows at the rate of inflation, except for when it passes 5.
Yep.
And then
Here we are.
it caps at 5. Yep. All right. This is an opportunity if anybody from the public wish to address the board about budget, or the levy, tentative levy, hearing
Sure.
none?
Did-
All right.
No?
Wait, is the board does anybody else from the board have a
Oh.
question? Everybody's okay?
No.
Okay,
All right. I'm
Then
gonna
we
go
need-
back to our, oh, wait, we need to.
No, we
close the
need
hearing.
to close,
Yeah.
You vote to
we need a
close-
motion for the Board of Education to close the Truth and Taxation public hearing.
So moved.
Mike and Sherrill?
Thank you very much. Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller. Jenny Hagstrom,
Aye.
Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler. And Nancy Kupka.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on back
Circle back.
to
Circle back.
IASB
Excuse me, I'm
resolutions.
gonna attend the village meeting.
Yep.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
We have the T99 project being reviewed by the village tonight. So Jim is there and Mark's.
Go for it.
Thank you.
So ISB resolutions, this is the time each year where the board considers the resolutions that are there. Traditionally, there's been some controversial ones. This year, not so much. So this is time for the board, if anybody wished to discuss any of those, and then we could pass back to Chris, anything that board members were concerned of.
There were fewer resolutions
Yeah.
than I think we've ever seen, and I
Yeah.
didn't see anything
This is a much easier year,
that I was
and
concerned about.
I didn't have any, I read through them all, I had no comments.
Did anybody else have anything they wanted to bring up for the resolutions?
I agreed with the positions that the committee had come to, yeah.
Yeah, pretty easy year, not much on this one.
Okay. That
All
was
right.
easy. School maintenance project.
School maintenance grant. So you'll fill in the gaps if I miss any, Jury?
Sure will.
All right, thank you. All right, so there is a round one for a school maintenance project grant, which can help offset our capital improvement projects for next summer. The board needs to approve us going for this grant. Should it be awarded, up to $50,000 could come back towards our capital projects next year. We need the board's approval to go after that money tonight.
I'm
How'd I do, Jury?
Perfect.
trying to understand why we wouldn't,
I don't know either, but we need your approval.
right? You've got mine.
Any discussion?
No?
Hearing none, we need a motion for the Board of Education to approve submission of a grant application for a school maintenance project grant.
So move.
Joanna and Sherelle.
Thank you very much. Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Cheryl Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Yes.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, motion carries.
Thank you.
So this is the second reception of visitors? Do we
Second
have-
reception of visitors.
Do we have anybody who wishes to address?
No forums? Is there anybody that wishes to address the board?
Okay, then we need a motion, I lost my spot.
It's on the sheet.
Thank you. We need a motion for the placement of, to go into closed session for the placement of individual students in special education programs and other matters relating to individual students.
So moved.
Second.
Mike and Terry.
Thank you. Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Cheryl Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye. We're going into closed session. The board will take action as noted in the agenda when it comes out of closed session.
And also to adjourn, hopefully.
And hopefully to adjourn.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I'm gonna run to the ladies.